Good morning to all. Let me begin by thanking Professor Gargiulo and the Ambassador of Israel to the Holy See for organizing this event. But I don't want to speak now, and I give you the floor.
Thank you so much. Okay. Buongiorno a tutti. Welcome. First of all, I would like to thank His Excellency Yaron Seidman, the Ambassador of Israel to the Holy See, for his collaboration in organizing this meeting, and along with him, the other institutions involved, the Washington Holocaust Museum, Yad Vashem, Tor Vergata University, in particular, the master they have about the didactic of the Shoah, then the Vatican Museums, and I would like also to thank Dr. Claudio Procaccia, the director of the Department for Cultural Heritage and Activities of the Jewish community here in Rome, for his valuable contribution. We are also deeply honored by the patronage of the Dicastery for Culture and Education. And thank you as well to our speakers, and above all, to all of you for being here today. Thank you, Professor Claudia Hassan, to moderate this morning session. Thank you to the colleagues that are present here. Let me just introduce Professor Jonathan Elukin, who comes from Trinity College in Connecticut. He's a visiting professor here at the Cardinal Bea Center for the second semester, and Professor Craig Morrison of the Biblicum, with whom we had a very important experience in February, I'm going to mention. And welcome to the other colleagues that come from Europe, from Romania, Dr. Zetea, and to all of you friends, professors, and special welcome to our students. We are very happy to have you here participating actively in the meeting today. So today marks the 80th anniversary of the end of the World War II in Europe. As a university, we cannot ignore the importance of studying and teaching such tragic and meaningful events, which are transitioning from the direct memory of those who lived through them to the indirect memory of subsequent generations. Today's meeting focuses specifically on the Shoah, and therefore falls squarely within the field of study of the Cardinal Bea Center. For this reason, together with the Israeli Embassy to the Holy See, we wanted today's event to have not only a scholarly profile, but also a didactic one, involving students and dedicating attention to educational programs on the Shoah across various institutions. In our licensate program, we approach its study from both a historical and a theological perspective, with courses on post-Shoah theology given by our professor, Rabbi David Meyer. This year, we were also able to organize a memory trip to Auschwitz and Krakow, together with Professor Morrison, with 11 students from both the Gregorian and the Biblicum. And I do hope we will have the resources to make it a regular part of our academic offering. As a Catholic university, we also place great emphasis on examining how centuries of Christian anti-Judaism contributed to anti-Semitism. In October, we will host a major conference on Nostra Aetate, marking its 60th anniversary, Nostra Aetate being a turning point in the relationship of the Catholic Church with Judaism. As a university operating in Italy, we also cannot forget, unfortunately, the role this country played in the Shoah during the period of the fascism through racial laws and deportations. I wish you all a day of deep exchange and reflection, in the hope that this will help our institutions to continue improving the study and transmission of what the Shoah was, what led to it, and what we can do to fight every form of revisionism or the resurgence of the sentiments that fueled it. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Seidman of Israel.
Thank you, Professor Hassan. And let me start right off by thanking you, Massimo, and the Gregoriana University and the Bear Center for partnering and hosting this very, very important workshop, as well as thanking the other facilitators, partners, contributors, speakers, Yad Vashem, the U.S. National Holocaust Memorial Museum, Tor Vergata University, and our sponsors, the Dicastery of Education and Culture, and primarily all of you who came here this morning and found the importance to dedicate your time to this very, very important workshop. So thank you. The title of the workshop is Preserving Memory of the Shoah at a Crossroad of Generations. What makes this a crossroad of generations is primarily the fact that first-hand survivors that bear first-hand accounts of the Holocaust are scarce, and in a matter of a few short years will not be here. And that places a huge challenge for us to be able to find innovative, new ways of preserving the memory of the Holocaust. And it's an important challenge because the lessons of the Holocaust and the obligations that it places upon us as individuals and societies are ones that can never be removed from us as people, as individuals, as cultures, generations to come. So finding a way of preserving the memory of the Holocaust as we move away from it in terms of the time that it took place is a huge challenge, and it is the one that really underlines the effort of this seminar, which is what makes it so critically important. As you mentioned, there is it also occurs on a historically consequential day, 80 years to the day, to the end of World War II in Europe and the end of the Holocaust. Also, given the again, you mentioned the Professor Gargiulio, the important role, obligation, and responsibility of the Catholic Church to be very active in combating anti-Semitism and in preserving the memory of the Holocaust. I feel it is highly significant and symbolic that this workshop is taking place exactly during the time when a new pope is being elected. And it's my hope that whoever it is that will be elected will take this responsibility in two hands very seriously and fulfill it in the best way possible. Let me conclude by reading a few short sentences from the Survivors' Declaration. The Survivors' Declaration is a speech, a declaration, read 23 years ago by Holocaust survivor Tzvi Gil at the closing ceremony of an international conference at Yad Vashem titled The Legacy of Holocaust Survivors, the Moral and Ethical Implications for Humanity. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which is an international alliance of 35 countries dedicated to preserving the memory of the Holocaust, and Israel this year is the president of IRA, of that alliance. So it initiated a global campaign for recommitting ourselves to the message a few short sentences I'll read now. And that declaration will also be sent to any of you to be signed digitally, and it is also placed outside to be signed physically outside of this room.
On the table.
On the table. And you're kindly requested, if you will, to sign it. It doesn't have to be on a particular line, just sign it anywhere in any free space. A few short sentences from that, and we will begin. Again, read 23 years ago in 2002 by a Holocaust survivor, Tzvi, of blessed memory. The age of Holocaust survivors is drawing to a close. Before long, no one will be left to say, I was there, I saw, I remember what happened. Massive documentation shall remain, research, lessons, pictures, and film. The dark inheritance of the Holocaust that was so indelibly stamped in the survivors' souls and hearts will become a sacred mission incumbent upon humanity. We, the survivors, chose to rebuild our lives, to join the fight for the establishment of the State of Israel, and to contribute to society in Israel and to all of humanity. The foundation of the State of Israel includes not only the memory of 6 million of our people who were murdered, but also a crucial historic lesson of the Shoah, namely that a Holocaust must never occur again. We share a deep desire to transmit to the future generations what we lived through and what we learned during that dark time before we bid farewell to this life that showed us so much bitterness. In Jewish tradition, the command to remember is absolute. It encompasses more than the mere cognitive act of memory and must be rooted in moral commitment. Today, we, for whom the memory is burned in our hearts and flesh, gather to pass the torch to the next generation. Jump to the end. The Shoah, which establishes the benchmark for absolute evil, is the universal heritage for all civilized persons. The lessons of the Shoah must become a cultural code for teaching human values, for democracy, human rights, and tolerance, and for countering racism and totalitarian ideologies. Remembrance in Jerusalem, the ancient proverb of Rabbi Hillel rings out, that which is hateful to you, do not do to another. This is our message to humanity. This is our legacy for generations to come. And I think these paragraphs, and again, the full text is outside and will be sent to you by email, also very much sets the stage for our mission in this seminar. So let's roll our sleeves and get going. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Ambassador of Israel. Thank you to Professor Gargiulo also for his work in the Cardinal Bea Center. It's a true honor for me to open and chair this morning session of our conference. We meet at a time that is both complex and crucial, a time shaped by 4 major challenges. One, the first, the erosion of historical memory, the very memory upon which Europe was built. Second, the spread of illiberal forms of memory. A fragmented third, a fragmented and polarized public sphere, especially on account of the effect of social media. 4, deep geopolitical transformation. These challenges affect all us all. The erosion of memory is linked to the weakening of the taboo against anti-Semitism and to a growing fatigue around the duty to remember. I prefer to speak about the work of memory and not of duty of memory. The liberal form of memory involves the increasing presence of anti-Semitism online. And finally, current conflicts remind us of the long and painful trends of history. As scholars, as educators, and as participants in this master's program, we have a lot of students of master's program. The master on Shoah, on studies on Shoah and the memory of University of Torregata. If you want information, you can ask me. We are called on to respond with the clarity and ok, avete sentito? Do you listen? Yes. What I say? Yes. This master, the name is, the master is on Shoah, studies on Shoah and memory. We are called now to respond to with the clarity, with the awareness, especially because we are in an age of confusion. We have the necessity to do distinction. For me, is the characteristic of intelligence. First presentation, we have Stefania Zezza. We begin with Stefania Zezza. Stefania Zezza present recently completely work that focuses on the value of function of testimony. Testimony as a means of transmitting the memory of the Shoah, especially now, in an era when direct oral witnessing is fading away. I love this work of Stefania because I read all his work.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for the invitation. The Shoah, though meant by its perpetrators to be erased from memory, has become the most extensively documented event in history, with a vast body of material produced by both perpetrators and victims. While Nazi records, often written in euphemisms, were deemed reliable and used in post-war trials, survivors' testimonies were initially viewed as subjective and insufficient for historical reconstruction. This legal perspective influenced early historiography, which focused on Nazi actions and policies, often overlooking the distinct suffering of European Jewry, who, despite being the primary targets, were considered as one victim group among the others. Actually, already from the midst of the war and in the aftermath, it was the victims themselves and later the survivors who first grasped the unprecedented and distinctive nature of the persecution. Survivors felt early on the need to preserve first-hand accounts to record the events. Beginning in 1948, the historian Philip Friedman called for a paradigmatic shift in Holocaust historiography from a Nazi-centered narrative to a Judeo-centric perspective that prioritized the victims' internal experiences and modes of understanding. This epistemological orientation had already characterized the work of Emanuel Ringenblum and the Oyneg Shabes archive in Warsaw Ghetto, which undertook the clandestine collection of both official documents and personal accounts to document Jewish life and suffering under Nazi persecution from within, ensuring the future generation would inherit an authentic and multifaceted record of the catastrophe. Both Friedman, who organized the first historical commission in Lublin in 1944, and Ringelblum were influenced by the historiographical methods of Jewish scholars such as Hansky and Simon Dubnov, who advocated an interdisciplinary approach to history, open to personal documents, incorporating ethnographic and sociological tools. In the immediate post-war years, many Jewish survivors, historians and non-historians alike, focused on preserving memory through documentation and testimony, especially in displaced persons camps and newly formed historical commissions, which collected about 20,000 personal documents. Contrary to the myth of survivor silence until the 1960s, as noted by David Cesarani, many spoke early on, though their voices were largely ignored by the public, focused on reconstruction. A notable exception was David Boder's 1949 study, I Did Not Interview the Dead, based on over 100 recorded survivor testimonies, which stood as the only major work on survivor memory during the 40s and the 50s. Testimonial materials have been produced by victims in various forms since then. Written accounts, such as diaries, letters, and memoirs, and oral testimonies, which have been transcribed, audio recorded, and more recently, video recorded. Here, I will focus on oral testimony, which is generally not pre-structured, includes elements such as silences that may be significant for the meaning of the message, and is organized according to the needs and expectations of the recipient, whether the general public, the interviewer, or the historian in particular, and the context, legal, historical, social, which may influence the selection of events included in the testimony and shape the specific perspective presented. Understanding survivor testimony as a socio-discursive object necessitates examining how it is both shaped by and reflective of the specific historical and cultural contexts in which it is produced and received. Actually, two interrelated factors need to be considered in relation to oral testimony: the socio-historical milieu at the time of the testimony is given, and the distinctive nature of the survivors' traumatic experiences, which influence both their memory and narrative. Regarding the former, it is important to note that over 8 decades since the Holocaust, societal perceptions of survivors have evolved, and with them the expectations placed upon these individuals. After the war, survivors often perceived themselves as the spokespersons for the dead. They were the Sherita Pleta, the surviving remnant, whose testimonies were largely marginalized or often confined to specific Jewish contexts. In the 60s, particularly following the Eichmann trial, the Holocaust survivor emerged as a living witness to the catastrophe, assuming a significant social, public, and historical role, combating oblivion and shaping collective memory. This initiated what, according to Annette Wiewiórka, is the era of the witness, in which focus gradually transitioned from the factual content of testimonies, their epistemic value, to the symbolic representation survivors embodied. Over the ensuing decades, survivors have become public figures, especially from the 80s with the advent of video-recorded testimonies. Their role evolved into dual capacities: as sources of historical knowledge and as ethical authorities, their lived experiences granting them a unique moral standing. Through sharing their experiences, survivors have been transformed into symbols of hope and moral educators and entrusted with conveying a spiritual legacy. In this context, the survivor is regarded as a memory truth bearer, whose narrative not only preserves the past, but also provides critical insights into the present and human behavior. Thus, testimony is perceived not merely as an individual act, but as a collective necessity to remember and to educate future generations, ensuring the memory of the Shoah and its victims remains alive. Regarding the second consideration, the specific and unprecedented traumatic experiences endured by survivors, and the manner in which these experiences have shaped their narratives, it is pertinent to ask, what can we ask of survivors who serve as vital links between past and present, and how can their testimonies be interpreted? In order to comprehend their messages, it is necessary to investigate how survivors' experiences have been cognitively processed and subsequently articulated in the construction and narration of their memories. As a preliminary consideration, it is useful to examine the epistemic status of Shoah survivors' testimony, a matter that has been the subject of extensive debate within the field of historiography. On the one hand, many historians consider its subjectivity, limited individual perspective, and lack of accuracy in relation to numbers, dates, names, as reasons to avoid it as an epistemical source. In contrast, particularly over the past 2 decades, historians such as Omar Bartov, Christopher Browning, and Dan Stone have advanced a renewed approach to survivor testimonies, formulating new questions that foreground aspects of the Shoah, accessible only from an internal experiential perspective, which transcend mere factual recounting. They provide critical insights into social, gender, and behavioral dynamics that are seldom discernible in other historical sources, thereby offering a nuanced understanding of individual experiences, interpersonal relationship, and social structures within ghettos and concentration camps. This work has illuminated subjects such as daily life in sub camps, the dynamics of the death marches, the social ramification of ghettoization, and the psychological and communal effects of deportation. According to psychologist Terry Grispan, testimony concerning such a catastrophic event is characterized by its authenticity, in the sense that it is perceived as true by the witness rather than necessarily being factually accurate. This perspective emphasizes the personal truth and sincerity conveyed in survivor narratives, acknowledging that while they may not always align with objective factual precision, they offer profound insights into the lived experience of individuals. Characteristic often deemed limitation by historians become strengths when considering the nature of the events in question, even for which no witness could possess complete knowledge. I'm cutting. From this point of view, sociologists and psychologists have played a pioneering role since the aftermath of the war, listening to oral testimonies in order to study their human behavior under extreme and traumatic conditions. The hermeneutics of Shoah testimony necessitate particular attention, as each individual narrative functions as a synecdoche, encapsulating a fragment of the collective experience. Testimony operates within a communicative framework where, adopting Jacobson theory, a witness, the sender, conveys a personally experienced event to an interviewer and by extension to society at large. This process involves multiple levels of mediation, resulting in content that is both memorial and discursive. Already in the 50s, scholars immediately understood the deep traumatic effects of the lived experiences of Shoah survivors' psyche, among them David Boder. He thought that the psychological effect of trauma could be understood analyzing the language used by his interviewees, and developed a traumatic index where he listed traumas according to their nature. He coined the word deculturation, antonym of acculturation, to depict the quick process through which the victims were deprived of previous civil habits, social frameworks, usual language, and because of which they adapted themselves to a completely inhuman and isolated environment. The effects of deculturation and the subcultural context are evident in the manner in which survivors articulate their testimonies. Sometimes specific feelings or conditions which belong to the same vocabulary used before and after the camp are considered by the witness himself not sufficient to convey the meaning they acquired inside the concentration camp. This complex situation has caused in the witness what Martin Kuschke has called linguistic despair. That is, their awareness that their words cannot both fully explain the events and be completely understood by the recipients. In addition to that, relatively new studies have shown that traumatic events remain deeply encoded in memory for decades. They are part of a deep or core memory that is often linked to psychological experiences and is consequently verbalized with expressions pertaining to the area of sight, hearing, smell, and in an episodic structure. Discrepancies may arise when core memories are translated into narrative form, as witnesses often make chronological, geographical, or personal adjustments in an effort to make sense of their experiences. Interpreting the words of survivors, then, requires an awareness that each act of testimony entails a translation of experiences lived within a deculturated and subcultural context into a language comprehensible to us. The hermeneutic challenge lies in decoding the syntax, structure, and lexicon of these accounts, thereby deepening our understanding of the inner history of the Shoah. Thank you.
Thank you. profound contribution. Your presentation has helped us reflect of the essential, of the essential role of testimony. Let us now move on the second presentation. Irene Campagna, our second speaker, who earned her PhD from Ulm in University of Milan, and also completed part of her academic training here at the Cardinal Bear Center. Her presentation will explore the relationship between art and memory. It's a field, it's a very important field. How can artistic narrative still preserve the memory of the Shoah today? You can start. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for this invitation and for this opportunity. Just some words to introduce myself. I'm not an historian. I draw upon historical sources and scholarly works in order to reconstruct the long and complex period of terror and violence. My contribution to the understanding and analysis Holocaust or Shoah concerns the changing forms it assumes during the time to resist the risk of oblivion. This lecture is set in a historical moment of brutal wars, including the conflict between Israel and Hamas, which erupted following the attacks of October 7, 2023. According to this, it's very important to highlight the specificity of Shoah and as a thing further than what's happening in Israel today. I'd like to begin my speech with some semantic consideration, quoting the historian Regine Robin. In her work, The Ghost of History, she offers a careful examination of the word memory. I do not particularly like Holocaust, even if it is the most known word, because of its religious and liturgical connotations. The use of term Shoah means catastrophe became more widespread after the release of Claude Lanzmann's film by the same name in 1985. Genocide appears too general and inadequate to highlight the specificity of the extermination of the Jew in history. Urban, a Yiddish word, also meaning catastrophe, is very rarely used. The term Shoah and Holocaust become widely known, partly due to the immense impact of the two cinematic works, Holocaust by Marvin Chomsky and Shoah by Claude Lanzmann. In 1945, when it was shown, first photographs of the camps did not yet have a name to call this systematic organization of deportation, detention, and extermination. For about 15 years, Auschwitz was not yet the central site upon which both collective memory and historical scholarship would later converge. Now, I'd like to reconstruct the principal stages of Holocaust memory, a beginning phase of oblivion concerning the extermination of the Jew in the immediate post-war period, the discovery of the figure of the witness from Nazi trials, particularly the Eichmann one in 1961 in Jerusalem. From this event, Holocaust memory re-emerged through the lens of testimony in private and in public opinion, as if to shock the world's conscience. At the same time, the number of Holocaust survivors are decreasing, leading us into a new era called post-memory. At this point, it is essential to acknowledge the considerable efforts made by survivors around the world to transcend the label of victim and instead assume the far more significant role of witness. This situation is mirrored also in literary questions. For example, the case of Primo Levi, ignored by Einaudi, who first refused to publish If This Is a Man, but after 10 years he did. Regarding society's inabilities to listen to witnesses, Primo Levi declared that he felt like Don Gennaro in Napoli Milionaria, a significant representation of the war in the city of Naples by the theatre genius Edoardo De Filippo. We see a brief extract of his work. And we see Don Gennaro. He tried to tell his experience in the Second World War, but no one listened to him. Now I switch of the second part of my presentation entitled Post-Memory and Second Generation Narratives. Because direct witnesses are disappearing, we'll see how, through the artwork of second generation witnesses artists, there has been a dissemination of the Shoah survivors' story in different art forms. Several scholars and historians have explored this phenomenon. I will limit to mentioning two, Marianne Hirsch and David Bidussa, with different work entitled Family Frames, Photography, Narrative and Post-Memory, and After the Last Witnesses. And starting from April 11, 1945, when Margaret Bourke-White captured images of several concentration camp survivors that shocked the entire world. In particular, one photograph of survivors gazing at their liberators from behind barbed wire became an icon of liberation. Years later, Marianne Hirsch was struck by the use of this same photograph in the first edition of Art Spiegelman's graphic novel Maus. Hirsch coined the term post-memory to describe the relationship that children of Holocaust survivors have with their parents' traumatic experiences. In Maus, Spiegelman tells the story of the Holocaust by starting with his father's life. Born in Stuttgart in 1948 to Wladek and Dania Spiegelman, Polish Jew who survived Auschwitz, Art grew up in New York and became active in the underground comic scene in the 1960s. In the graphic novel, the characters are drawn as animals, Jews as mice, Nazis as cats, and Poles as pigs. The choice is both bold and tactful. In fact, the animal masks reflect how people were stripped of their identity during the Holocaust, reduced to anonymous victims. The story begins in 1978 when Art starts to speak with his father, not just to write about the Holocaust, but to understand the man with the tattooed number 175113. Maus is now seen as a milestone in the history of comics and a key reference in Holocaust memory studies. With this dedication to all those I love, and they are many, Michael Kichka opens his graphic novel, Second Generation, What I Did Not Tell My Father. Kichka, son of Henry, a Belgian Jew and survivor of Buchenwald, confronts both inherited trauma and personal loss. The suicide of his younger brother Charlie becomes a key moment in the story. Just before I left, a friend came to say goodbye. He hugged me and said, "Another victim of the Shoah." I was in such shock that I didn't pay attention to that reflection. I had already heard of the second generation syndrome, and me, was I immune to that? Kichka depicts the horror of his father's memories of internment and the pain of his brother's death. The father's story emerges gradually by Michael's childhood recollection, shocked to realize his father's past. The graphic novel was featured in a 2015 exhibition at Mokak Museum of Contemporary Art in Krakow, placed in the library space. Among the many forms that have explored the testimonial and expressive dimension of Holocaust memory, the exhibition Poland, Israel, Germany stands out. It was presented across several venues within the museum, the MoCA Collection exhibition space, the Alpha Gallery, and the library. In this exhibition, Auschwitz was presented as a site with a dual identity, at once a place of official memory and institutional commemoration, and part of a tourist circuit that, in extreme cases, risked turning into a Disneyland of horror. Indeed, the exhibition's distinctive concept is also tangible in the relationship between the caption and the artworks, which were conceived not simply as description, but as interpretative tools that guided visitors to deeper meanings. In a large hall evoking a factory interior located in the Schindler's former factory, a circle of bronze shoes was displayed with the caption, "Because monuments are made of bronze." The contrast between the material solemnity of the monument and the everyday detail of shoelaces pointed to the pointed to the humanity of the victims, our parents, not distant mythical figures. Sigalit Landau's work entitled Oh, My Friend, There Are No Friend evoked the rupture between life and art, intimacy and catastrophe. Equally provocative was the inclusion of Jane Corman's performance video, first exhibited in Melbourne in 2009. It featured her father, Holocaust survivor Adolf Corman, dancing with his daughter and grandchildren in front of a few concentration camp gates, to I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. The performance was criticized for its apparent levity. The piece was defended by the artist as a personal and affirmative act of memory, emphasizing survivor and the passing on testimony across generations. Okay, I switch on the third and final part of my presentation entitled Site of Memory Today, the Museology of Shoah. Today, Site of Memory serve as guardians of the past and play a fundamental role in transmitting Holocaust. This function has become important through the process of musealization, which transforms this site into space of education, reflection, and collective remembrance. The expression Site of Memory gained full legitimacy with the publication of Les Lieux des Mémoires, a series curated by French historian Pierre Nora. In his work, Nora argues that a site of memory is not necessarily a physical or workable location, but rather a meaningful place, physical or symbolic. It can be a tangible or object or an abstract idea shared by a community. And what about sites of memory today? Memorials dedicated to the Holocaust, museums built on site of memory, and museum-side concentration camp, which today I define museology of Shoah, a field dedicated to the study and the exhibition of the Holocaust in museums. It also explores ethical and methodological issues, such as the respectful representation of events, the selection of which stories to tell, the educational role of museums, and the involvement of communities in the process of remembrance. A process made possible by the development of contemporary museology started in the early 20th century, when museums began to shift from being places of collection and display to becoming instruments for cultural interpretation and civic engagement. In 1934, the Office International des Musées organized the first international conference in Madrid. Then, in 1946, the International Council of Museum was founded, followed years later by UNESCO's Regional Seminar on Museum in Rio de Janeiro. These very important years in which two key concepts were defined: museology, the theoretical study of museums, and museography, the practical technique of exhibition and display. Holocaust museums emerged within this evolving context. Rooted in historical trauma and loss, the institutions often display not just objects but the site themselves. In some cases, only ruins remain. In other, personal belongings such as clothing, shoes, letters, photographs, or, in a rare and ethical controversial cases, human remains are exposed. Regardless of how much material they contain, these spaces often evoke a strong emotional response. Their museological language goes beyond traditional monuments, transforming them into active places of remembrance and education. The architecture and design of these museums, particularly those located at former extermination camps, express the reality of death and persecution in minimalistic and emotionally changed forms. Holocaust museums also embody hybrid temporalities. While rooted in history, they use contemporary tools and media to speak to today's audiences. Oral testimony, video interviews, interactive displays, and personal narratives are now central to the visitor experience, creating immersive and multisensory environments. In this new museological paradigm, the focus has shifted from preserving the object to making the historical and cultural document legible and accessible. This evolution is not without its challenges. Scholars such as Alberto Cavaglione and Enzo Traverso have examined how visitors sometimes fail to full grasp the meaning of the sites they visit. Often, especially in educational context, there is an assumption that simply being present as a site of atrocity is enough to understand it. Many visitors leave with only a vague impression or a superficial memory of the phrase "never again." Two contemporary multimedia projects help us reflect on this phenomenon. Holocaust, a photographic project by Israel artist Shahak Shapira that critique commemorative culture by combining selfies taken at Berlin Holocaust Memorial with images of Nazi extermination camps. The second is Austerlitz, a film by Sergei Loznitsa, inspired by Sebal's novel of the same name, that observes tourists at a former concentration camp, poses questions such as, why do people visit these sites? What are they really seeking? I'd like to conclude my speech leaving these questions, which leads me to emphasize once again that memory is not a passive inheritance, but a living, plural, and constantly evolving practice, capable of generating awareness, empathy, and resistance to oblivion. It is within this tension between fidelity to the past and openness to the present that the possibility of a memory that remains authentic, critical, and civic is at stake today. Because, as the images, drawing, landscapes, and voices examined in this work remind us, the deeper meaning of remembrance lies not simply in preservation but in activation, the activation of thought and action, in a word, responsibility. Thank you.
We conclude this part of this session with this joint presentation by Emilio Aljuna Valencia Ochoa, exactly, and Thomas Well. Yes, they will share their reflection from a memory journey to Krakow and Auschwitz-Birkenau, perhaps with the Cardinal Bear, I think. To their testimony and insights, they will help us understand how such journeys can become truly meaningful to transform educational experiences. I listened to a mayor of Rome some years ago, and he said the people come transformed from the trip. You? Okay.
Good morning. First, let me extend my sincere gratitude to the Cardinal Bear Center for organizing our trip to Poland on February 13 to 15, 2025, in memory of the Holocaust. This journey offered me an invaluable opportunity to deepen my understanding of Holocaust history and engage in a profound spiritual pilgrimage to honor the memory of the Jewish people who perished in the Nazi concentration camps, with Auschwitz standing as one of the most infamous among them. It's difficult to articulate the emotions and thoughts that emerged during our visit, especially when walking through Auschwitz I and Auschwitz II-Birkenau. As our guide recounted the historical horrors, I found myself silent and trembling, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the genocide and the number of lives brutally extinguished by the Nazis. Entering the barracks and rooms that once imprisoned countless souls, I was horrified and paralyzed by the magnitude of the suffering. To witness the physical remnants of life lost, hair, shoes, suitcases, was to face a chilling reality. An entire people were gassed, burned, and starved to death. The conditions of camps, as recalled by our guide, were beyond the capacity of imagination. The cruelty, the hunger, the cold, the illness, and the omnipresence of death reduce human life to dust. I could hardly fathom that every belonging, even the hair of victims, was used to fuel the Nazi industrial machine. The Holocaust is so harrowing and traumatic that it shatters one's ability to explain or comprehend it. As we pass through rooms filled with personal effects, our guide continuously reminded us this is beyond human imagination. To walk through Auschwitz as a student, priest, and missionary is to be suspended in existential space where knowing and unknowing collide. I've studied the Holocaust as a rupture, a void in human history. The only way I can describe the emotional aftermath of the visit is to say it is a rupture. One is lost in the face of this reality, stripped of conventional categories of thought and emotion. I was reminded of the words of Michael L. Morgan, as I quote, "No philosophical, theological, physiological, or history theory adequately explain enough of its central features to leave us with a confident sense that we have understood this event or have grasped its meaning." Auschwitz underscores the deep historical suffering of the Jewish people. Amid this suffering, I found myself asking, where was God? As a Christian, the question weighed heavily. God forbids murder. It is the sixth commandment. So did God allow this to happen? My mind was filled with such questions as I reflected on the silence of God during the Holocaust. For my fellow students and me, the trip was not only an educational journey, but deeply personal and transformative experience. Auschwitz left indelible mark on each of us. We witnessed firsthand what we had only encountered through books and lectures. The silence along the path, the heavy stillness in each corner of the camp, felt soaked in the pain and grief of those who have passed through. The most haunting were the belonging of children, especially the toys. How could such cruelty be inflicted upon innocent lives? One student expressed it poignantly. When you stand in these places, you realize how fragile human life is and how important it is to stand against hatred and indifference. This visit was not merely a story lesson, it was a moral challenge. It taught me to cherish life and uphold the dignity of others, irrespective of religion or social status. The Holocaust reminds us that there was once a time when darkness threatened to consume humanity. Yet this memory must serve not to anchor us in despair, but to propel us forward with a commitment to justice and peace. And I recall the words of Emmanuel Levinas, "You shall not murder," which he interpreted as the call to defend the life of the others. While I wrestle with theological questions about God's silence, I also recognize that human beings use their freedom to inflict suffering. The Holocaust was not merely a consequence of misguided freedom, but intentional and ideological driven exercise of power. Facing this, we must ask, where was humanity? This question is as much about our past as it's about our present. Christianity, including myself as a Christian, must confront its historical failures and commit anew to defending life. From this, I draw three major reflections. First, religious language can become instrument of violence. Since religion still plays a vital role in many societies, Christians must ensure that our words and actions bear witness to the defense of human dignity. Second, the study of the Holocaust must remain a central concern of the Church, like what Ambassador said, so I agree with you. Serving as a guide for moral integrity in addressing contemporary issues. And third, students, like those of us at the Pontifical Gregorian University, must listen deeply to the silent cries of Auschwitz. This experience calls us to become voices for those whose stories were never told. The Holocaust is not just a Jewish story, it's a human story. It reveals both the deep evil and the highest of moral courage. Even today, we see ideologies and divide humanity into us and them, fostering hatred and prejudice. Anti-Semitism still exists, and the lesson of Auschwitz compels us to confront such evil in our world today. My experience compels me to remember, to speak out, and to resist the temptation of indifference. Primo Levi's words resonate deeply. It happened, therefore it can happen again. This is the core of what we have to say. As non-Jews who visit Auschwitz, we must remember that this genocide was committed against the Jewish people. We have responsibility to defend Jewish life today. Lewis prays, this is the core, invite us to dialogue with Jews, not as passive listeners, but as active moral agents. So are we ready to listen to their suffering? Are we prepared to act? Pope John Paul II rightly called anti-Semitism a sin against God and humanity. Since Nostra Aetate in 1965, the Catholic Church has repudiated anti-Semitism, and Pope Francis has urged continuous vigilance. Christians must not only care for the rights of Jews, but also work with them in opposing hatred. Eugene Korn's question remains timely. Is Christianity in the 21st century a threat to Jews, or can it be a spiritual and political ally? We must answer this by our action. We should really care for and promote justice toward the right and safety of Jewish people. And as we return to Rome, the word of Primo Levi continue to echo. It happened, therefore it can happen again. This reflection ends with a call to action. Anyone who understands the Holocaust must resist hatred in all its forms. If we remain passive, we risk giving the Nazis a posthumous victory, as Emil Fackenheim warned. Let this memory move us to build a world worthy of the victim's dignity. Let us remember not only to mourn, but to act, so that never again becomes truly never again. Thank you.
Thank you for your emotional. Where was God? You said. The Jewish answer says God is weak. And if God is weak, he needs us as a human being, and also as a responsibility. Yes, thank you. And now, the second part of this relation.
First of all, I would like to say two things. The first one is I would like to thank you to the Cardinal Bea Center for the opportunity not only to attend the trip, but also to be able to share some thoughts around it today. And second, as an introduction, I would like to take on what Irene Campagna was finishing with, because I think that that point is the one that made me write this text in particular. When I was in Auschwitz, I was thinking of myself as a Mexican, as a non-Jewish person. Why am I here? What is the purpose of my visit here? How do I gaze through the horror of what these people experience, and what can I take from my experience upwards onto it? So this text is the response to that. The history of humanity is always a return. The paths of human reason, no matter how advanced or unexpected, inevitably lead back to the foundations of the world, perhaps without even knowing it. Everything rests on the same roots. And though the human tree has grown immeasurably, nourished by labor and time, the trunk that sustains it is the same now as it was at the beginning. We, however, have climbed so high that we imagine the roots no longer matter. choosing to forget them and stubbornly attempt to build foundations from above, with air as our only support. We neglect what is primordial and cling instead to the fleeting pleasure and usefulness of the instant, an instant reduced to a fragment of time, trimmed of meaning. And yet, in the time we inhabit, returning to what is essential becomes vital. Words have lost their power to name things, and we find ourselves drawing ever nearer, with increasing urgency, to once again inhabiting our most painful shadows. To speak of origins is never simple. They are marked by religious, philosophical, literary residues. But perhaps the essence of the beginning is its own absence. Its power lies in being an empty space, open to creation. In that space, before judgment, before identity, lies the possibility of encounter, a time when no I passed sentence upon any other. Still, the complexity of our world confronts us. Modernity and its many forms have emptied our moral coordinates, making the present not just a condition, but a responsibility. And yet, within it, there remains an opportunity for deep transformation, the restoration of non-judgment, which gives rise to tolerance, to recognition. And the condition for that transformation is the opening of consciousness. To open the mind is perhaps the most powerful act a person can carry out today. It requires knowledge, not in the technical sense, but as an attitude of receptivity. The mind must not be territorialized, but thrown wide open. Only those who truly practice tolerance can come to see that their inherited portion of reality is capable of welcoming the world in its difference. In February of this year, I, together with fellow students from the Cardinal Bea Center and the Pontifical Biblical Institute, had the opportunity to take part in a journey of memory to Auschwitz. That journey has changed the way I see the present and has allowed me to understand that it is only through the celebration of our differences that we can strive to build better times. This experience shaped, in a way, that open space of tolerance that I was referring to before. To experience Auschwitz, even from a distance and with a heritage I do not share, made the foreign close. It broke the walls of history and made space for the gazes of bodies who were never allowed to live, to dream, and to love freely. Travel always opens new horizons, but to face one of the still open wounds of our time shifts the very perspective from which we move beyond ourselves. Contact with history, such as the one we lived, teaches us to see more clearly, to understand that the violent past of our species was not the result of mere chance or the accident of a particular time, as some would like to think, even though both factors might have played a role. No, Nazi genocidal violence was always a communal decision, born of a discourse that rallies specificity against difference. And if that happened once, as Thomas was saying, repeatedly across the seas of times that divides and shape us, it means it will happen again. I say this with sorrow. I reject the idea of many who say that what happened in Auschwitz is something that could happen in an abstract rhetorical way, because it is happening today. As we speak, the lives of many are being sacrificed for the sake of restricted ideals and politics that fail to see that we live in a shared space where everyone should be allowed to experience grace and joyfulness. My country is a very clear example of this. In very different forms, with realities far removed from those of the past century, horror is still happening. More so still today, whenever a group of powerful individuals decides to use force to erase the possibility of livelihood of another group of equally worthy individuals, simply because they don't meet their expectations of reality or share the same world vision, a version of Auschwitz is happening. If memory serves any concrete instructive purpose, it is this: to teach us that the only way to build a livable world is by learning to see the other as someone different from me, someone whose experience I can never fully understand, and therefore must never attempt to change. I must learn to coexist. I do not believe that history repeats itself. Rather, it is shaped by defined wills. Though actions may look alike, the forces that move them are vastly different. Still, retrieving the past in the present is essential, not to avoid the future, but to think and feel from unexplored perspectives, so that we may act differently and reach places we've never imagined. To stand where the ashes remain is as overwhelming as it is meaningful. Overwhelming because to be in a place of death while surrounded by the beauty of life is always an experience of transformation. And meaningful because the will to know the world is itself a radical gesture of tenderness and hope. In order to do so, we must remember. We must cherish spaces such as this to put ourselves open for discussion and, yes, sometimes in the face of discomforting memories. But it is only through the exposure to the open wounds of our past that we can strive to acknowledge better our present. At the end, remembering and forgetting are the arteries of our psychic becoming. We are what we remember. We think according to what we can retain. Forgetting, by contrast, is the void, the place where all eyes stop seeing, where a world is left behind in silence. These two forces, in tension, generate the visible world and the society we inhabit. There is little more to say. Beyond a porous memory, beyond the ability to store stories, we are a collection of hearts, moved by a shared will to survive and thrive and know, and sometimes even love. If we do not reach beyond ourselves, if we do not draw near to behold the naked face of the other, as Martin Buber would say, we will never make of this world a place where each day is a beginning and each hour a time of grace.
Thank you very much. Okay. Have you got the coffee? Yes or not? It's a great pleasure to resume our session with the presentation by Dr. Suzanne, yes, Brown-Fleming. She's a senior project director for international programs at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum of Washington. And today, Brown-Fleming will present on the collaboration between the Vatican Archive, yes, and the Washington Museum. Okay, thank you.
Let me make sure. Okay, this is good. Perfect. A nonpartisan federal educational institution, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum is America's national memorial to the victims of the Holocaust, dedicated to ensuring the permanence of Holocaust memory, understanding, and relevance. Through the power of Holocaust history, the museum challenges leaders and individuals worldwide to think critically about their role in society and to confront anti-Semitism and other forms of hate, prevent genocide, and promote human dignity. Our mission is made possible by strengthening the collection of record and making it globally accessible so that the history and memory of the Holocaust endure, and that the academic field of Holocaust studies remains vital. This is our vision. I'm honored to be here to share a few words about the museum's Vatican Archives initiative, formed 5 years ago and prompted by the opening of the archives for the 1939 to 1958 period of Pope Pius XII. The Vatican Archives Initiative acquires, analyzes, and makes accessible copies of Vatican-related materials, to enhance and reshape Holocaust scholarship. We also aspire to a leadership role in disseminating key findings embedded in rigorous scholarship to a worldwide audience. What does this mean concretely? Our team works in 4 key areas: engagement with other stakeholders, acquisition of digital scans for availability at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, committing to enhancing access by way of detailed descriptions of the materials, participating in the production of new knowledge, and by being part of scholarly gatherings like this one. Let me say a word about our partners in this vital mission. We work together with our colleagues and friends at Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center in Jerusalem, to team up on studying the materials opened in 2020 and identifying those that are important for our period of study. We work together to create detailed finding aids and descriptions for scholars specifically interested in Holocaust-related work, so that these scholars can more efficiently identify and study the materials of interest for their projects among the estimated 16 million pages that were released in 2020. Since the conception of this project in 2020, we have worked with multiple partners in Rome and Vatican City. This wonderful institution that we are here now, the Pontifical Gregorian University, the Vatican Apostolic Archive, the Archive of the Holy See's Dicastery for Eastern Churches, the Pontifical Teutonic Institute of Santa Maria dell'Anima, and the Archives of the Society of Jesus, or Jesuit Archive. In each of these archives, we've worked to identify materials that I believe will reshape scholarship on the Holocaust and the Roman and Eastern Catholic churches, and I can say more about that in the question and answer. I will provide a few examples so as to whet the appetites of young scholars in this room. We have been working with large sets of documentation, including the various nunciatures or papal diplomatic headquarters for the 1939 to 1958 period, records of the Commissione Soccorsi, the office established by the Holy See in September 1939 and containing requests for help from refugees of all kinds over the decade that followed, and the records of prominent individuals who played key roles during this dramatic and tragic period of history. Examples of such individuals include Father Robert Leiber, close aide to Pope Pius XII, whose valuable papers are at this esteemed institution, Father Taki Venturi, close aide to Pope Pius XI and unofficial liaison to Mussolini for the Holy See, and Father Alois Hudal, Austrian rector of the Pontifical Teutonic Institute of Santa Maria dell'Anima, whose relationship with both Popes Pius XI and XII, and also his relationship with escaping Nazi war criminals after the Second World War, all bear further study. These are only some examples from the rich treasures of these new archives. Let me be more specific about what I mean when I say the museum's Vatican Archives initiative is working with such sets of documentation. Our hope, when and where it is possible, is to acquire digitized scans of these treasures for study purposes at our museum's David M. Rubenstein National Institute for Holocaust Documentation, which houses an unparalleled repository of Holocaust evidence about the fates of victims, survivors, rescuers, liberators, and others. Our comprehensive collection in Washington contains millions of documents, artifacts, photos, films, books, and testimonies, and I think this morning's panel really was a beautiful illustration of how this interdisciplinary source base really creates such an important picture. Scanned copies of collections from around the world are part of these efforts, And my colleague Anatol Steck is here. He's really our expert in this. He's in the back. Now he's waving. For a scholar, it means that visiting our David and Fella Chappelle Family Collections Conservation and Research Center can be sort of a one-stop shop. For example, should a scholar wish to study the history of particular victims of Nazism, they would be able to access in the read-only or study format digital scans of files that appear in the aforementioned Commissione Soccorsi records appealing to the Holy See for help. Using other collections, for example, Nazi-generated documents or relevant film footage or photographs from the time and place these victims were writing their appeals to the Holy See, scholars can build a fuller picture. Cross-referencing and access to additional materials in the same archival reading room means that a scholar can be more efficient and effective in their work. In the instances where our partners do not permit yet or cannot accommodate the digital scanning of their collections for study in other archival locations, it remains crucial for our Vatican Archives Initiative team to be actively working in this wonderful city. To study and transcribe descriptions of the material is also very important. This way, when scholars come to the museums in Washington or Jerusalem, we can help to advise on where within these vast new materials one might look during a research trip to Vatican and related archives in Rome. I'll conclude with an example from the Holy See's Dicastery for Eastern Churches, where it has not yet been possible to scan materials and where we have supported team members to study the documents from this period. During one of my own visits, I came across reports written by Andrei Sheptytsky, Order of St. Basil the Great, who was the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Metropolitan of Galicia and Archbishop of Lviv from 1901 to 1944. And we heard earlier this morning the importance of this other part of the Holocaust by bullets in the East. And in Lviv, today in Ukraine, then in Poland, for example, most Jews were murdered by shooting not far from where they lived. And Sheptytsky was a witness to this and wrote reports about this. And during his years in Lviv, which was then Poland, today Ukraine, he endured both Soviet and Nazi occupation. Historians continue to debate his full legacy during this complex period of Ukrainian independence movement, communist occupation, and Nazi determination to murder every single Jewish man, woman, and child in Europe. I know from the oral testimony of Kurt Levin, available in the museum's reading room, that Sheptytsky facilitated hiding Kurt and other young Jewish men in the monastic order of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church in Lviv, and it was in this way that Kurt survived. Surely a study of the Sheptytsky original letters that are here in Rome at the Dicastery for Oriental Eastern Churches will shed even more light on such deeds and why he risked so much to undertake them. We're proud to work with all of our partners, and there's so much more to discover, study, and make known to the world that I think it really demonstrated your very moving words this morning. I really appreciated them as a Catholic. It shows me that all of us really crave a better understanding of this dark period. And we're really thankful in this setting to Father Mark Lewis, the rector of this fine college, Dr. Massimo Gargiolo, director of the Cardinal Bea Center for Judaic Studies, and other sponsors and organizers of today's event. We are honored to be part of it, and I'm happy to say more during the question and answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a very important project. I understand that it's also... sorry. The archive is the same also for Yad Vashem or only Washington? Yes. Then we can go as academic. Academic world is very happy for this project, but also for the network that it promotes. Then it's Now I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Elliot Needham Orvieto. He's the head of the Academic Affairs section at Yad Vashem International Institute for Holocaust Research. He leads the research program on the Vatican and the Holocaust, and also serves as the national coordinator of European Holocaust research in Israel. The floor is yours, and for explaining the Yad Vashem program, also for our students.
Thank you for
Thank you.
the invitation, and we're very happy also to be partners with this event. It's been a wonderful experience to hear everything this morning, and that brings me to this presentation, actually, because what I would like to talk about is research and ways to help researchers, which we've seen all morning long, basically. And for the audience here, some of you are students and researchers and scholars, and some of you help researchers and scholars. So I think it's beneficial for everyone. But have you ever noticed with researchers, even with yourself, that you have questions? And you sit and go, I really wish I had someone to talk to about this. I have this idea, but I'm not sure. Where can I find that documentation that I'm missing for that topic? There are many questions that people have when they're doing research. And in 1993, Yad Vashem created or established the International Institute for Holocaust Research. Not that Yad Vashem did not do research before 1993. It did. But in 1993, Yad Vashem wanted to encourage and support worldwide scholarly research. It wanted to develop and coordinate international research the best way it could, and to undertake scholarly projects. The importance here is to encourage and conduct research based on real documentation. Authentic, factual documentation is extremely important to the International Institute for Holocaust Research at Yad Vashem. So we have various projects to help researchers in their projects. One is our fellowship program. We have both postdoctoral fellowship programs, but we also have a fellowship program designed for doctoral students to come to Yad Vashem, to conduct research for a period of about 2 weeks, and go back. We support it all. And the reason is it advances the research worldwide. It also allows the person to get to know researchers and talk about it to the staff. We also have an internship program, both in person and virtual. So a person can come and do an internship by Zoom. And this internship program, I have to say, is to help the researcher in part with the research that they are conducting. So if they're working on, one person was working on Volkswagen years ago, we try to help them and give them the documentation to help with their research, at the same time to give them the experience that they want as an intern on something about Yad Vashem or to help Yad Vashem itself. So there's different ways the internship program is done. We also have various workshops. Some workshops we do are on particular topics. Some workshops we do are only for students, PhD students, sometimes MA students, to come together and talk about a topic. Now, these kind of workshops help the student have experience, first of all, in explaining what they're doing to other people. It also helps them understand more about their own methodology and discuss methodology with their peers who are also invited. We also have a workshop exchange program. For instance, one university brings its students to Yad Vashem, and then Israeli scholars are brought to that university as a way so that they can experience and talk to the people in the different countries about their research. And of course, we all know we encourage collaboration with other institutions as well. Yad Vashem has various projects, which I'll just mention. We have a study on the aftermath of the Holocaust. We have the Killing Sites Project, where we look at sites where people were murdered. We have the Deportation of Jews project, where we try to track the different deportation and who were on the trains, etc. We have our project on Austria and the Holocaust, Germany and the Holocaust, and we have the Vatican and the Holocaust project. And since we're here, I'll just mention, in this project, we want to encourage researchers to utilize Vatican material and church documentation for their many projects, not particularly related to the church. As we know, the Vatican has a wide range of material. Now, you might be asking, so what does this have to do with me or the students? And I'll have to tell you, I have been working at Yad Vashem in this position for 25 years. I have seen many survivors come and talk to us, and I have seen them go to the world beyond. I have also seen wonderful scholars, fantastic scholars, come and also pass on and leave a void. I was thinking of today when she asked the question, who's not here at the moment, but she asked the question about Poland. And I was thinking of Israel Gutman. Professor Israel Gutman never, ever, when he talked about his experience of Auschwitz, only mentioned Jews. He always talked about the suffering of non-Jews. But he's passed on. But one of the nice things about my job is I get to help the next generation, the one that we're passing the light on to. And that has been a thrill for the past 25 years, because you see the new ones coming in and the new ones coming and learning about the Holocaust. And to do this, what we try to do is to make connections. What I try to do in my task is to make connections between senior scholars and those who are coming in if they have a question, to help them find the documentation that they need. I either try to find it myself or I contact the Yad Vashem Archives, which has a special section just to help young and senior scholars find the documentation if they have a question. My also task is to help if they have an idea. I share it with the different staff members. This person has an idea. What do you think? And I write them back and say, well, they said to look at this and to think about this, and how would you approach that? And this, so that they can advance their research abilities. So there are many different ways that we have been trying to pass the candle to the next generation. One of the things that I wish to mention, that in the next session this afternoon, I'll leave my card out on the table, wherever the downstairs is assistant next in the next session. I'll leave my card. Take the card. You might never need it. You might want to pass it on to another person. But I'm here. I will not be able to answer all your questions. I'm not that kind of a scholar. But I will certainly do my best to help. And that is what Yad Vashem has been trying to do for passing the candle, basically, to find out what I can to help the young scholars pass on and continue Holocaust research. Thank you.
Thank you.